The void between stars held many secrets, but none as dangerous as the one Captain Talvesh was about to find. His ship, the Harmony's Edge, moved slowly through the empty space like a metal fish swimming in an ocean of darkness. The ship belonged to the Galactic Coalition, a group of alien races that had worked together for thousands of years to keep peace in the galaxy. Talvesh was a nebulae, one of the water-breathing races that looked like tall, blue creatures with large black eyes and fins where humans might have ears. His crew was mixed, as all Coalition ships were. There was Dr. Kira from the Vextai race, who looked like a giant praying mantis but was one of the best scientists in the galaxy. There was also Rendok, a rock-like being from the Steinari people, who could speak and understand more languages than anyone else alive. They were on a survey mission, looking for new planets and checking old space routes for anything dangerous. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. The galaxy was huge, and even after all these years there were still places no one had ever been. "Captain," called out Navigator Zilleth from her post. She was a Quillian, covered in soft purple fur with 4 arms that moved over her controls, like a dancer. "I'm reading something strange ahead. It's big and it's not moving." Talvesh swam over to look at the screens. His people lived in water-filled sections of the ship, so he moved through liquid-filled tubes to get around. When he reached the main bridge, he pressed his webbed hands against the glass barrier that separated his water section from the air-breathing crew. "What do you see?" he asked, his voice coming through the water speakers. Dr. Kira's insect-like head tilted as she studied the readings. Her 4 arms moved quickly over different controls, gathering information from the ship's sensors. "It appears to be a derelict vessel, Captain, very large, approximately 12 kilometers in length." Talvesh felt his fins twitch with interest. 12 kilometers was massive, even by Coalition standards. Most ships were only 1 or 2 kilometers long at most. "How old is it? Running scans now," Dr. Kira replied. Her compound eyes reflected the light from her screens as she worked. "Captain, this is unusual. The materials don't match anything in our database. The construction methods are completely foreign." Rendok's rocky voice rumbled through the bridge speakers. "Perhaps it belongs to one of the extinct civilizations. There were many races that died out before the Coalition was formed. This was true. The galaxy had once been full of different species, but many had destroyed themselves in wars or died out from disease or other disasters. The Coalition had been formed by the survivors who had learned that working together was better than fighting. "Take us closer," Talvesh ordered. "But keep our shields up and weapons ready. We don't know if it's really dead." The Harmony's Edge moved toward the giant ship. As they got closer, everyone on the bridge became quiet. The ship was not just big, it was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. It was made of a dark metal that seemed to drink in the light from the stars. Strange symbols were carved along its hull, symbols that none of them had ever seen before. "The design is so different," whispered Engineer Thox, a small green creature with 6 legs. "Look at those weapon ports. There are hundreds of them. This was built for war." Dr. Kira was running every scan she could think of. "Captain, the age readings are... This can't be right. According to carbon dating, this ship has been floating here for over 100,000 years. A cold feeling went through Talvesh's body. 100,000 years was longer than recorded history for most Coalition races. "Are you certain?" Running the tests again. "Yes, Captain. 100,000 years, possibly more." Rendok's rocky form seemed to shift as he thought. "There are legends, very old legends, about a great war that happened long before any of our civilizations reached the stars. The stories speak of a race that threatened the entire galaxy." "Just stories," Dr. Kira said, but her voice was not as sure as her words. "Maybe," Rendok replied, "but the stories all agree on one thing. This race was completely destroyed. Every last one of them was killed to keep the galaxy safe." Talvesh made a decision. "We're going aboard. Dr. Kira, Rendok, Thox gear up for exploration. Everyone else stays here and keeps watch." The boarding team put on their environment suits and took a small shuttle over to the giant ship. Finding an airlock was easy. The ship had dozens of them. What was strange was that the airlock was the right size for beings about as tall as the average coalition member. But the design was all wrong. The controls are completely different, Thox muttered as he tried to figure out how to open the door, but the mathematics behind them, it's actually quite elegant. After an hour of work, they managed to get inside. Emergency lights flickered on as they entered, showing that somehow, after all these years, the ship still had power. The corridors were wide and straight, with no decoration except for more of those strange symbols. Dr. Kira took pictures of everything while Rendok tried to figure out what the symbols might mean. The air is breathable, Dr. Kira reported, checking her instruments. Old, but not poisonous. The gravity is set to coalition standard. They found living areas, workspaces, and what looked like a bridge. But the most important discovery came when they found a section of the ship that was colder than the rest. Cryogenic storage, Dr. Kira said, her voice full of excitement and fear. Captain, there are beings in here. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, and they're still alive. Talvesh looked through the window of one of the pods. Inside was a creature unlike anything he had ever seen. It had pale skin, hair on the top of its head, and 5 fingers on each hand. Its face was peaceful, as if it was sleeping. What are they? He whispered. Dr. Kira was studying her readings carefully. Unknown species. But Captain, look at this. She pointed to a screen that showed biological information. Their DNA. It's incredibly complex, more complex than any known species, and their brain structure suggests high intelligence. Rendok had found something else. On the wall near the pods was writing in those strange symbols, but below it were numbers and mathematical equations that he could understand. I think this might be their name for themselves, he said slowly. If I'm reading this right, they called themselves humans. The word felt strange in all of their mouths. Humans. It sounded simple, but something about it made them all feel uncomfortable. They explored more and found the ship's computer core. It was still working, protected by systems they couldn't understand. Dr. Kira managed to access some basic files, and what she found made everyone on the team step back in shock. Captain, she said, her voice barely a whisper. This ship, it's called the Indomitable Will. And according to these files, it's not alone. There were dozens of ships like this one, maybe hundreds. They were all fleeing from something. Fleeing from what? Talvesh asked. Dr. Kira looked at the data again, hoping she was wrong. From us, Captain. From the Coalition. According to these records, our ancestors hunted them down and tried to kill every last one of them. The silence on the comm channel was complete. Then Rendok's voice came through, quiet and worried. Captain, if these records are true, then the legends were wrong. These humans weren't the monsters, we were. Talvesh stared at the sleeping figure in the pod. After 100,000 years, the galaxy's greatest secret had been found, and it was going to change everything. Pack up everything you can, he ordered. We're taking this ship back to Coalition space. Command needs to know about this. But as they prepared to leave, none of them noticed that some of the pods had started to show new activity. Deep inside, ancient systems were beginning to wake up. The ship had been waiting for a very long time, and now that it had been found, it was time for its crew to return. The Coalition Council met an emergency session on the capital world of New Harmony. Representatives from every major species sat in the Great Chamber, their different forms creating a rainbow of shapes and colors. At the center of the room, a hologram showed the human ship floating in space, surrounded by Coalition vessels. Admiral Vex High, the current leader of the council, was a tall, thin being from the Altarian race. Her skin was silver, and her eyes were pure white, giving her an otherworldly appearance. She had lived for over 300 years, and had never seen the council so worried. The situation is clear, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. We have found a ship from the extinct human race. The ship contains living specimens in cryogenic storage. The question before us is, what do we do with them? Many voices began speaking at once. Some wanted to destroy the ship and everyone on it. Others wanted to study the humans to learn about this ancient enemy. A few, very few, suggested that maybe they should try to wake one up and talk to it. Dr. Kira stood up to address the council. She had been studying the ship for weeks now, and what she had learned frightened her. Honored council members, I must tell you that these beings are not what our legends describe. Their technology is advanced, yes, but it's not built only for war. I found medical facilities, schools, art galleries, and even what appears to be a garden. These were people trying to live, not monsters trying to destroy. Lies, shouted Representative Gorth, a large, bear-like creature from the Ursinian worlds. Our ancestors didn't make mistakes. If they said these humans were dangerous, then they were dangerous. We should destroy that ship before those things wake up. But they're already waking up, Dr. Kira said quietly. The entire chamber fell silent. What do you mean? Admiral Vexhai asked. Dr. Kira activated her datapad, and new images appeared on the main screen. Some of the cryogenic pods are showing increased activity. The ship's computer systems are becoming more active as well. I believe that finding the ship has triggered some kind of automatic revival process. The fear in the chamber was thick, enough to taste. These politicians and military leaders had grown up on stories about the terrible human war. They had been taught that their ancestors' greatest achievement was wiping out the human threat forever. How long do we have? The Admiral asked. Maybe a few days, maybe hours. The process seems to be accelerating. After hours of debate, the Council made a decision that would change the galaxy forever. They would attempt to revive one human under controlled conditions. If they could understand what the humans wanted, maybe they could find a peaceful solution. Dr. Kira was chosen to lead the revival process. She selected what appeared to be a military officer, based on the uniform visible inside the pod. The human was female with dark hair and strong features. Her nameplate, when translated, read Lieutenant Commander Jiwan. The revival took place on a coalition medical station, surrounded by guards and scientists. Dr. Kira worked carefully, following the procedures she had found in the ship's medical files. The process was surprisingly gentle. Human technology seemed designed to wake people up slowly and safely. Jiwan's eyes opened gradually, and she took a deep breath of air. For a moment, she just lay still, looking at the ceiling. Then she turned her head and saw Dr. Kira's insect-like face staring down at her. Any normal being would have screamed or fainted. Jiwan just studied Dr. Kira for a moment, then spoke in her strange human language. The translation computer worked quickly. "Where is my crew?" were her first words. Dr. Kira tried to speak gently. "You are safe. We are the Galactic Coalition. Your ship was found drifting in space. You've been asleep for a very long time." Jiwan sat up slowly, her eyes moving around the room, taking in everything. She saw the guards with their weapons, the scientists with their instruments, the cameras recording everything. Her face showed no fear, only calculation. "How long?" she asked. 100,000 years, Dr. Kira replied. For the first time, emotion showed on Jiwan's face. Pain, deep and terrible. "The war. Did we win? Is Earth safe?" Dr. Kira didn't know how to answer that. Through careful questioning over the next few hours, they learned Jiwan's story. She had been a military officer on the Indomitable Will, one of many ships that had fled from what she called the Great Hunt. According to her, Earth and all human colonies had been under attack by a coalition of alien species who saw humans as too dangerous to exist. "You're lying," she said when Dr. Kira tried to explain about the peaceful Galactic Coalition. "The Nebulae, the Vextai, the Steinari, all of them were part of the hunt. They wanted us dead because we wouldn't bow down to them." But the war ended. Long ago, Dr. Kira tried to explain. The coalition brought peace to the galaxy. Jiwan's laugh was bitter and cold. "Peace? You call genocide peace? You hunted down every human ship, every colony, every family. You turned our children into slaves and our worlds into graveyards. And now you call it peace." The more Jiwan talked, the more uncomfortable the coalition observers became. Her version of history was completely different from what they had been taught. In her story, humans weren't conquerors or destroyers. They were explorers and builders who had simply refused to accept the rigid social order that the older alien races tried to force on everyone. We were different, Jiwon explained. We adapted fast, learned quickly, built new things. The old races didn't like that. They said we were dangerous because we wouldn't stay in our place, so they decided to kill us all. Dr. Kira found herself believing this human's words. The evidence she had found on the ship supported Jiwon's story. These people had been refugees, not invaders. But Jiwon wasn't finished. She looked directly at the camera, knowing that coalition leaders were watching. "You made one mistake," she said. "You assumed that because you couldn't find us, we were all dead. But humans are very good at surviving. We're very good at adapting, and we're very good at remembering." "What do you mean?" Dr. Kira asked. Jiwon smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "I mean that the indomitable will wasn't the only ship that escaped. There were dozens of others, maybe hundreds. They scattered to every corner of the galaxy, to places you've never even looked. And every ship carried the same things: our people, our knowledge, our culture, and our memory of what you did to us." The room became very quiet. Some of those ships had orders to hide, to wait, to survive until it was safe to return. Others had different orders. They were supposed to find new homes, build new civilizations, grow strong again. And a few had very special orders. "What kind of orders?" Admiral Vexhai asked through the communications system. Jiwon looked right at the camera again. "The kind of orders you give when you know your species might be extinct soon. The kind of orders about making sure that if humanity dies, we don't die alone." Dr. Kira felt her blood turn cold. "Are you threatening us?" "I'm not threatening anyone," Jiwon replied calmly. "I'm just telling you what is. You spent 100,000 years building a peaceful galaxy on the graves of my people. But some of those graves were empty, and now we're back." She stood up from the medical bed, and every guard in the room raised their weapons. Jiwon ignored them completely. "I want to see my ship. I want to see my crew. And I want to know exactly what you've done with human space while we were gone." "That's not possible," Admiral Vexhai said through the speakers. Jiwon walked over to the window and looked out at the stars. "Admiral, you've made a lot of mistakes. Your ancestors made the mistake of thinking they could kill all the humans. You made the mistake of thinking we'd stay dead. And now, you're about to make the biggest mistake of all." "What's that?" "You're going to try to keep me from my people." Jiwon turned back to face the room. "I've been awake for 6 hours. In that time I've learned your language, studied your technology through your own computers, and figured out exactly how weak you've become in your 100,000 years of peace." Dr. Kira checked her instruments in panic. "That's impossible. The translation computers are isolated systems." "Not anymore," Jiwon said simply. "Humans are very good at adapting. We're also very good with technology. Did you think we'd sleep for 100,000 years and not learn anything new?" Alarms started going off throughout the station. Security systems were failing, doors were opening and closing randomly, and the lights flickered. "Wake my people," Jiwon said calmly as chaos erupted around her. "Wake them now, return our ship, and maybe we can find a way to coexist. Or don't, and find out what humans learned to become during 100,000 years of exile." She walked toward the door, and when the guards tried to stop her, she moved like liquid water, flowing around them without seeming to touch them. By the time they turned around, she was gone. In the observation room, Admiral Vexhai stared at the screens in horror. "Find her," she ordered. "Find her now." But deep down she knew it was already too late. The humans were back, and everything was about to change. Jiwon had disappeared into the station's maintenance systems like a ghost. The coalition security teams searched everywhere, but found nothing except sabotaged equipment and confused reports from witnesses who swore they saw her in 3 different places at the same time. Admiral Vexhai made a decision that she would regret for the rest of her life. Instead of trying to hunt down one dangerous human, she ordered her teams to wake up more of them. If the humans were going to be a problem, she wanted to understand that problem completely. Dr. Kira protested, but the Admiral overruled her. We need to know what we're dealing with. Wake up their senior staff. Maybe we can negotiate with them. The first to be awakened was Chief Engineer Minho, a man with careful eyes and steady hands. Unlike Jiwan, he seemed calm when he woke up, almost as if he had expected this moment. He listened quietly as Dr. Kira explained the situation, nodding occasionally. So we've been asleep for 100,000 years, he said finally. And you found our ship by accident? Yes, Dr. Kira replied. Minho smiled slightly. There are no accidents, Doctor. The indomitable will was designed to be found when the time was right. Before Dr. Kira could ask what he meant, Minho was already moving around the medical bay, examining the equipment with professional interest. His hands moved over the alien technology as if he understood it completely. Interesting design, he murmured. Inefficient but reliable. You focused on safety over performance. That's what happens when a civilization gets comfortable. How can you understand our technology so quickly? Dr. Kira asked. Because it's not that different from ours, Minho replied. You've had 100,000 years to develop, but you've been building on the same basic principles. We had to learn to adapt much faster. He found a computer terminal and began working on it. Within minutes, he had accessed systems that should have been impossible for an outsider to reach. What are you doing? Dr. Kira demanded. Checking on my ship, Minho said without looking up. Making sure she's still in good condition after all this time. The next human they woke up was Science, Officer Unji, a woman with sharp eyes and a quick mind. She was less patient than Minho. The moment she understood the situation, she began asking detailed questions about galactic politics, star charts, and resource distribution. Show me a map of this sector, she ordered. You're not in a position to make demands, Admiral Vexhai said through the communication system. Yunji looked directly at the camera. Admiral, I've been awake for 20 minutes. In that time, I've accessed your station's computer network, downloaded your navigation database, and identified 17 critical weaknesses in your defensive systems. Would you like me to demonstrate, or would you prefer to show me that map? The lights in the room flickered ominously. Dr. Kira quickly brought up a holographic display showing the local star systems. Yunji studied it with intense concentration, occasionally asking for more detail about specific worlds or trade routes. Fascinating, she said finally. You've built your civilization exactly where we plan to build ours. Every world we identified as suitable for colonization, every strategic resource point, every defensive position. It's like you used our own surveys as a blueprint. That's impossible, Dr. Kira protested. Those surveys would have been destroyed with your civilization. Would they? Yunji asked with a smile that made everyone in the room nervous. The third human they awakened was Medical Officer Hayuk, a quiet man who seemed more interested in studying the aliens around him than in talking to them. He ran medical scans on everyone in the room, including the guards, using instruments that he somehow produced from seemingly nowhere. Remarkable, he murmured as he looked at the results. The genetic modifications are more extensive than our projections suggested. What modifications? Dr. Kira asked. Hyuk looked at her with something like pity in his eyes. Doctor, do you know what you are? I'm a Vextai, Dr. Kira replied, confused. No, Hyuk said gently. You're a human, a modified human, but still, fundamentally human. The neural patterns, the genetic markers, the basic biological structure, it's all there, just changed to look like something else. The silence in the room was deafening. That's impossible, Dr. Kira whispered. Is it? Hyuk continued his scans. Your people, the Vextai, when did they first appear in galactic history? Dr. Kira thought about it. About 90,000 years ago. They evolved from a primitive species that was discovered by the early coalition. Or, Hayuk suggested, they were created from human prisoners who were captured during the war. Genetically modified, their memories erased, turned into something that would serve the coalition faithfully. He moved to examine Rendok, the rock-like Steinari. This is beautiful work, actually. They took human-based genetics and adapted them to survive in high-gravity, low-atmosphere environments. The mineral deposits in the skin, the enhanced bone structure, even the way the organs are arranged. It's all designed to let a modified human live on rocky, airless worlds. Rendok stepped back, his rocky face showing confusion and fear. "You're saying I'm human? Your great-great-great-grandmother might have been," Yuk replied, before they changed her into something that could mine asteroids and never complain about working conditions. The implications hit everyone at the same time. If Yuk was right, then many of the coalition species weren't natural evolutions at all. They were modified humans, created to serve specific purposes for the civilizations that had destroyed humanity. It was at this moment that Captain Daehyun was awakened. Unlike the others, Daehyun had been in the deepest level of cryogenic sleep reserved for the most senior officers. His awakening process took longer, but when his eyes opened, there was an immediate sense that the most dangerous person in the room had just joined the conversation. He listened without interruption as Dr. Kira explained the situation. He nodded. When Minho reported on the ship's status, when Yoonji described the galactic political situation, and when Hyuk explained his discoveries about coalition genetics. When they were finished, Daehyun sat up and looked around the room. His gaze lingered on each person, as if he was memorizing their faces. "Where is Lieutenant Commander Jiwon?" he asked. She escaped," Admiral Vexhai admitted. "Good," Daehyun said simply. "She's doing her job." "Which is what, exactly?" the Admiral asked. "Reconnaissance," Daehyun replied. "Learning about our enemy's capabilities and weaknesses. Standard procedure when awakening in potentially hostile territory." "We're not your enemy," Dr. Kira protested. Daehyun looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. "Doctor, your people participated in the systematic extermination of my species. You turned our survivors into genetic slaves. You built your entire civilization on our graves. If that doesn't make you our enemy, then the word has no meaning." He stood up, and immediately every guard in the room tensed. But Daehyun made no threatening moves. Instead, he walked over to the window and looked out at the stars. "However," he continued, "we're not the same species that you destroyed 100,000 years ago. We've learned, adapted, evolved. The question is, have you?" "What do you mean?" Admiral Vexhai asked. "I mean that we have a choice to make. All of us. We can repeat the mistakes of the past, or we can try to build something better." Dr. Kira felt a small hope growing in her chest. "You're willing to negotiate?" Daehyun turned back to face the room. "I'm willing to listen, but understand. We're not the helpless refugees we once were. We know what you're capable of because we've been watching you for a very long time." "Watching us?" the Admiral asked. "Did you really think we all went to sleep?" Daehyun smiled, and it was not entirely friendly. "Some of us stayed awake, generation after generation, keeping watch, learning your languages, studying your technology, mapping your weaknesses. We know everything about you, Admiral. Everything." Minho looked up from the computer terminal he had been working on. "Captain, the ship's communication systems are online. We can contact the others now." "Others?" Dr. Kira asked weakly. "The other ships, Doctor," Yoonji explained patiently. "Did you think the indomitable will was alone out here? We've been waiting for the signal to wake up for 100,000 years." Daehyun nodded to Minho, who began activating communication systems that the Coalition didn't even know existed. "Wait," Admiral Vexhai said urgently. "Before you do anything that can't be undone, let's talk. Really talk. Maybe we can find a solution that doesn't involve more war." Daehyun paused and looked at the Admiral's image on the screen. "You want to talk? Then show good faith. Release my people from these restraints. Return our ship to full operational status, and acknowledge that we have the right to exist as free beings. And if we refuse, then you'll discover what humans learned during 100,000 years of exile." Daehyun said quietly. And trust me, Admiral, you won't like the lesson. The standoff was complete. 4 awakened humans stood facing the entire might of the Galactic Coalition. But for the first time in 100,000 years, the aliens weren't sure they had the advantage. In the depths of space, other ships were beginning to receive signals. Ancient systems were coming online, and sleeping crews were starting to stir. The humans were back, and this time they were ready. They were. The emergency session of the Coalition Council was the largest in galactic history. Representatives from every member world had come to New Harmony, and the great chamber buzzed with nervous energy. Above them all, holographic displays showed the human ship Indomitable Will, now fully powered and surrounded by a growing fleet of Coalition vessels. Admiral Vexhai stood at the center podium, her silver skin reflecting the harsh lights. Fellow beings, we face a crisis unlike anything in our recorded history. The humans have returned, and they are not what we expected. Captain Daehyun entered the chamber flanked by his crew. Unlike the fearful aliens around them, the humans walked with calm confidence. They wore simple uniforms that had been created from their ship's manufacturing systems, and each carried a small device that projected their words in perfect translation. To every language in the chamber, Daehyun stepped forward to address the council. Honored representatives, I am Captain Daehyun of the Earthship Indomitable Will. I come before you today not as a conqueror or an invader, but as the voice of a people who were thought to be extinct. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Many of the aliens had never seen a living human before, and they studied these beings with a mixture of fascination and fear. Before we discuss the future, we must first address the past, Daehyun continued. For 100,000 years you have told yourselves a story about the Great War that brought peace to the galaxy. Today, I will tell you the truth. He gestured, and Science Officer Yoonji activated a holographic display. Ancient star charts appeared showing the galaxy as it had been before the Coalition existed. This was our space, Daehyun said, indicating a large region in the galactic spiral arm. These were human worlds, human colonies, human trade routes. We were not an empire built on conquest. We were explorers, scientists, builders. Our greatest achievement was not weapons of war, but the development of terraform technology that could turn dead worlds into gardens. The display changed, showing green worlds full of cities and farms. We were young as a species, barely 5,000 years into space travel when we encountered the first alien civilizations, the Altarians, the Gorvani, the Hegemony Collective. At first we were overjoyed. We were not alone in the universe. Representative Sithrak of the Gorvani delegation stood up. Your people were aggressive from the beginning. Our historical records show human ships attacking our trade vessels. Do they? Daehyun asked calmly. Yoonji manipulated the display, and new documents appeared. These are the actual communication logs from first contact with your people. Human, diplomatic vessel Aurora requesting permission to establish trade relations. Your response was to demand that humans accept client species status under Gorvani oversight. The chamber fell silent as the ancient records played. The human ship's captain, speaking in careful diplomatic language, asking only for the right to establish peaceful trade. The Gorvani response was harsh and demanding. Humans must accept alien oversight of all their activities, alien approval for all their expansion, alien control over their technology development. We refused, Daehyun continued. Not because we were warlike, but because we believed in the right of self-determination. Every species should be free to choose its own path among the stars. Chief Engineer Minho stepped forward with more data. This pattern repeated with every alien civilization we encountered. They all demanded the same thing, that humans submit to their authority and accept limits on our growth and development. Because you were dangerous, shouted Representative Gorth. Your species adapted too quickly, learned too fast, spread too widely. You threatened the natural order of galactic civilization. The natural order, Medical Officer Hayuk repeated quietly. An interesting phrase. Tell me, Representative Gorth, what was natural about genetically modifying captured humans into slave species? The chamber erupted in angry voices. Hayuk waited for the noise to die down before continuing. I have spent the last week analyzing the genetic patterns of coalition member species. The results are disturbing. At least 40% of your so-called diverse alliance consists of modified human stock. New displays showed genetic comparison charts. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. The Vextai were created from human scientists, modified for enhanced analytical thinking, and adapted for low-gravity research environments. The Steinari were human miners, altered to survive on airless worlds and process mineral ores in their own bodies. The Quillians were human pilots and navigators modified for enhanced spatial awareness and reaction time. Representative after representative stared at the genetic evidence of their own modified humanity. Some tried to protest, but the science was too clear to argue with. Even species that appear completely alien show signs of human-based genetics, Yuk continued. The nebulae aquatic adaptations, the Gorvani hive mind modifications, the Altarian longevity treatments, all built on human genetic templates. Dr. Kira, who had been allowed to attend the session, stood up slowly. If this is true, then our entire understanding of galactic history is wrong. Not wrong, Daehyun corrected. Deliberately falsified. The truth was buried because it was inconvenient. He activated another display, this one showing historical records from the human ship's archives. The war you call the Great Cleansing was not a noble struggle against human aggression. It was systematic genocide carried out against a people whose only crime was refusing to submit to alien authority. The records showed the truth in horrifying detail. Human colonies burned from orbit, refugee ships hunted down and destroyed, captured humans taken to genetic modification facilities, where they were transformed into new species designed to serve their captors. We fought back, of course, Daehyun continued. Any species would. But we were outnumbered and unprepared for the scale of the assault against us. In the end, we had only one choice, run or die. So you ran, Admiral Vexhai said. Some of us ran, Daehyun corrected. Others chose to stay and fight to the end. Still others chose a different path entirely. Science Officer Yunji stepped forward. The indomitable will was one of 47 ARC ships that escaped the final assault on Earth. Each ship carried 10,000 humans in cryogenic storage, along with our complete cultural and technological archives. 47 ships, Captain Daehyun continued, with different missions. Some were to find new homes in distant galaxies. Others were to hide and wait for a better time to reveal themselves. And some, he paused, letting the tension build. Some were given darker missions. They were to ensure that if humanity died out completely, we would not be forgotten, and that our destroyers would not go unpunished. The chamber was completely silent now. For 100,000 years, those ships have been out there, growing stronger, learning more, preparing for this moment. They have watched your civilizations rise and fall. They have studied your weaknesses and mapped your strengths. They know everything about you, while you knew nothing about them. Representative Thalvek of the Hegemony Collective stood up, his crystalline form glowing with agitation. Are you threatening us? I am informing you, Daehyun replied calmly. The age of lies is over. You can no longer pretend that your peaceful galaxy was built on anything other than genocide and slavery. The question now is, what are you going to do about it? Admiral Vexhai leaned forward. What do you want from us? Justice, Daehyun said simply. We want the truth to be told. We want recognition that the human species has the right to exist. We want reparations for 100,000 years of stolen lives and lost worlds. And we want the return of our people. What people? The Admiral asked, though she already knew the answer. Every modified human in this galaxy. Every Vextai. Every Steinari. Every Quillian. Every being who carries human genes deserves to know what they really are. They deserve the choice to remain as they are or to be restored to their original human form. The implications hit the Council like a physical blow. If the humans could restore the modified species to their original forms, it would mean the end of the coalition as they knew it. That's impossible, Representative Gorth protested. Those species have been separate for thousands of generations. Medical Officer Hayek smiled grimly. Nothing is impossible with sufficient technology and time. We have had both. And if we refuse your demands? Admiral Vexhai asked. Captain Daehyun looked around the chamber at the hundreds of alien faces, staring at him. Then you will learn exactly what we discovered during our 100,000 years in exile. You will learn what happens when you corner the most adaptable species in the universe and give them time to evolve. He activated a final display, showing star charts of the current galaxy. Every major coalition world, every strategic resource, every military installation, we know where they all are. We know your defensive capabilities, your response times, your command structures. We have been preparing for this moment since before your civilizations learned to build starships. The display zoomed out to show the entire galaxy, and new markers appeared. Dozens of them, hundreds, scattered across every sector. Those are human ships, Daehyun explained. Ships that have been waiting for the signal to wake up. As of this morning, they are all beginning to stir. The chamber erupted in panic. Representatives shouted orders to their home worlds, demanding immediate military alerts. However, Daehyun continued, his voice cutting through. The decision should have been simple, but the Coalition Council could not agree on anything. Some representatives wanted to negotiate with the humans. Others demanded military action before the human fleet could fully awaken. Still others suggested fleeing to distant parts of the galaxy and hoping the humans would leave them alone. Admiral Vexhai found herself caught in the middle of arguments that grew more heated with each passing hour. Outside the council chambers, coalition citizens watched news broadcasts with growing fear. The revelation that many of their own species were modified humans had shattered their understanding of everything they thought they knew about galactic history. On the indomitable will, Captain Daehyun waited patiently for the coalition's response. His crew worked quietly around him, monitoring communications and tracking the awakening of human ships across the galaxy. The process was going exactly as planned, something that had been prepared for over 100,000 years. Captain, Science Officer Yoonji reported, we're receiving confirmation signals from 36 ARC ships so far. The Perseverance has awakened near the Altarian home system, the Defiance is active in Gorvani space, and the Remembrance has made contact with the Hegemony collective border worlds. What about the military ships? Daehyun asked. Chief Engineer Minho looked up from his instruments. The Vengeance-class vessels are still in deep hibernation, as planned. They won't wake, unless we send the emergency activation code. Daehyun nodded. The Vengeance ships represented humanity's darkest preparation for this day. Vessels designed purely for war, carrying crews who had volunteered to give up any hope of peaceful coexistence in favor of pure revenge. He hoped they would never need to wake those ships up. Lieutenant Commander Jiwon entered the bridge, having spent the last week moving freely through Coalition space despite their best efforts to find her. Captain, I've completed my reconnaissance of their military capabilities. What did you learn? They're weak, Jiwon reported bluntly. 100,000 years of peace has made them soft. Their weapons are defensive, their tactics are focused on containment rather than destruction, and their troops have never fought against an enemy that fights back effectively. What about their numbers? Impressive on paper, but most of their fleet is scattered across thousands of worlds maintaining civil order. They could probably gather a significant force in a few months, but by then it will be too late. Daehyun finished. The other ARC ships will be fully operational. Medical Officer Hayek approached with a data pad in his hands. Captain, I've been analyzing the genetic modifications performed on the human-derived species. The good news is that most of them can be reversed. Most of them. The changes made to create the Vextai and Quillians are relatively minor. We could restore them to base human form within a few generations. The Steinari modifications are more extensive but still reversible. However, the nebulae aquatic adaptations and the Altarian longevity treatments would be extremely difficult to undo. Are you suggesting we should force these changes on them? Daehyun asked. No, Captain. I'm suggesting we give them the choice. For the first time in their species' history, they can choose what they want to be. This was the heart of the human position. Unlike their ancestors who had demanded submission, The returning humans were offering something that the galaxy had never known: true freedom of choice. The Coalition's answer came 3 days later, delivered by Admiral Vex-High in a transmission to the human ship. Captain Dae-hyun, the Coalition Council has reached a decision. We are prepared to negotiate, but we have conditions. Dae-hyun activated the communication system. I'm listening, Admiral. First, you must agree to halt the awakening of any additional human ships until negotiations are complete. Second, you must provide us with the locations of all human vessels currently in our space. Third, you must submit to Joint Coalition human oversight of any genetic restoration procedures. Dae-hyun was quiet for a long moment. Then he began to laugh. It was not a pleasant sound. Admiral, do you understand what is happening here? This is not a negotiation between equals. This is the return of a species you thought you had destroyed forever. We are not asking for permission to exist. Then what are you doing? We are informing you of the new reality, Dae-hyun replied. Humanity has returned. We will reclaim our place in this galaxy. The only question is whether that process will be peaceful or violent. Admiral Vex-High's voice became urgent. Captain, please reconsider. If you force this confrontation, millions will die on both sides. Millions already died, Admiral. Billions, actually. My people have been dead for 100,000 years. What you're seeing now is not an invasion. It's a resurrection. Chief Engineer Minho looked up from his console. Captain, I'm reading massive energy signatures throughout Coalition space. It looks like they're mobilizing their fleet. Dae-hyun sighed. So they've chosen the hard way. He opened a ship-wide communication channel. All hands, this is the captain. Prepare for combat operations, activate all defense systems, and begin charging the main weapons array. But before he could give any orders for attack, Science Officer Yoonji called out in excitement. Captain, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Perseverance. Captain Hyun wants to speak with you immediately. The main screen activated, showing the bridge of another human ship. Captain Hyun was a woman about Dae-hyun's age, with gray hair and tired eyes. Dae-hyun, we have a problem, she said without preamble. The Altarians have agreed to our terms. What terms? Full recognition of human sovereignty over our original territorial claims, acknowledgement of the genocide and formal apologies, reparations to be negotiated in good faith, and voluntary genetic restoration programs for any Altarian citizens who want to explore their human heritage. Dae-hyun stared at the screen. They agreed to all of that? Everything. It seems that when you're 300 years old, you have a different perspective on history. The current Altarian leadership includes some individuals who were alive during the original war. They remember what really happened, and they've been carrying the guilt for millennia. Similar reports began coming in from other human ships. The Gorvani were offering to negotiate. The Hegemony Collective was requesting formal talks. One by one, the older civilizations were choosing diplomacy over warfare. But not all of them. Captain, Lieutenant Commander Jiwon reported, Coalition, military forces are massing near the core worlds. It looks like some of the member species have decided to fight rather than negotiate. Admiral Vex-High's voice came over the communication system. Captain Dae-hyun, I'm ordering you to stand down, immediately. The Coalition cannot and will not accept your demands. Which demands would those be, Admiral? Dae-hyun asked mildly. The right to exist as equals in this galaxy. The right to reclaim worlds that were stolen from us. The right to restore our people to their original forms. We find these demands unacceptable. Dae-hyun looked around his bridge at his crew. Each of them had lost everything, their families, their worlds, their entire civilization. They had spent 100,000 years in exile dreaming of this moment. Admiral, I'm going to give you one last chance to reconsider. Stand down your fleet. Agree to negotiate in good faith, and we can find a peaceful solution to this situation. Never, Admiral Vex-High replied. The Coalition will not bow to threats from extinct species. Extinct? Dae-hyun repeated softly. Then his voice hardened. Chief Engineer, activate the emergency awakening protocol. All Vengeance-class ships, all military reserves, all sleeper agents, wake them all up." "Captain, are you sure?" Minho asked. "Once we activate the Vengeance ships, there's no going back." "They had their chance for peace," Daehyun replied. "They chose war." Across the galaxy, ancient signals went out to ships that had been waiting, in the deepest sleep. These were not exploration vessels or colony ships. These were weapons of war, built by a species that had learned to fight for survival against impossible odds. The crew of the ship called Final Justice woke up with fury in their hearts and revenge in their souls. The captain of the vessel named Remember Earth opened her eyes with only one mission: to make sure that those who had destroyed her world would never threaten anyone again. But the most dangerous ship was the one called Human Will. Its captain had been chosen not for his wisdom or his diplomacy, but for his absolute commitment to human survival. When he woke up and learned what had happened to his species, his first order was simple: begin the cleansing. Admiral Vexhai watched her sensor displays with growing horror as human ships appeared throughout Coalition space. These were not the exploration vessels they had been dealing with. These were warships built by a species that had perfected the art of warfare through necessity. "How many of them are there?" she asked her sensor officer. "Hundreds, Admiral, maybe thousands, and they're all heading for major Coalition worlds." The first battles were over almost before they began. Coalition ships designed for peacekeeping and defense found themselves facing vessels that had been built with only one purpose: to win at any cost. The human ship Retribution appeared over the Gorvani homeworld and issued a simple demand: surrender now or be destroyed. When the Gorvani fleet